Hello friends, this is the second marquetry image I made for the cabinet I'm working on. The scene this time is a library with our character looking up towards a window high above the looming bookshelves, catching a glimpse of sunlight. This is a very tall image and it will be done as two separate panels, what's known as a diptych. I began by constructing the bookcase, which makes up the majority of the picture. This veneer, with very distinct linear grain, was the inspiration for the scene, as I thought it reminded me of the spines of books. I don't know what species it is, though. To make it read as individual volumes, I drew a random outline of different heights, letting the grain determine the width of each book. Then I hopped over to the foot-powered scroll saw and cut it out as a piece of double bevel marquetry. If you missed the previous marquetry video, this technique, briefly explained, uses a tilted table to produce a bevel cut, so the conical piece from the top veneer falls into the tapered hole in the bottom veneer and the angles eliminate the curve. I'm using a thick paper spacer in between the veneers, which makes it so this angle can be less acute. With the row of books and their background taped together, I marked and cut away the excess, somewhat rough and oversized because I knew I would have to find the exact height of each row one by one as I built up the picture. On a piece of walnut veneer, I then laid out and cut a series of long tapers. These will be the shelves that the books stand on. Very light pressure and multiple passes is needed here, so the wood doesn't want to split away from my lines. And in true cooking show behavior, I prepared a bunch more rows of books in advance. Working on top of my tracing now instead of under it, I taped them up with a shelf of walnut between each. The taper in the walnut pieces give perspective to the scene. Oftentimes a row of books needed a small adjustment to line up with the drawing. Doing these knife-cut lines was very different to the sawn ones, more like geometric parquetry, and it was really fun to be able to combine the two methods in a single motif. Next I needed a pair of uprights. They are not side panels because the shelves continue on either side, but I don't know if there is a term specifically for this part of a bookcase. Divider, maybe? Anyway, in marquetry form they take the shape of more walnut tapers because the perspective is looking up. The viewpoint is close to the floor in this picture. When I had them located, I scribed their width at a couple of spots, so I could connect these marks with a ruler and slice out room for the uprights to fall in. Again, I made these cuts very carefully with light pressure, as I'm cutting both with and across the grain on a bunch of pieces only held together by masking tape. I actually found it easiest to finish the cut with a pair of scissors. This avoided splintering in a few of the cross-grain cuts that put up some extra resistance. It was then time to find the spot where this needs to be split in half and start working on the two parts of the diptych separately. I began with the top panel, and here the detail consists mainly of the window. I chose maple for the opening to look like sunshine, and then built up the surrounding stonework with successively darker veneers. The whole window assembly then had to be inserted into this walnut burl representing the stone wall. This time I can't saw into the veneer from one of the edges. The cut has to start in the middle of the piece, so I made a small hole for threading the blade through. I don't have a super convenient quick release on my saw, but it's not too fiddly to loosen the clamping screw holding the blade. I also had a few details I could saw without making a starting hole. These are meant to look like marble busts that I for some reason associate with libraries. I don't know if it really is a thing, but yeah. I placed the assembly under the tracing paper using the locating marks, the little crosses scattered in the image, and marked where I needed to cut a straight line to meet the bookcase. Alright, that's the upper of the two panels complete, so let's move on to the lower one. I began by placing and transferring some locating crosses, and then traced the line joining some maple highlights to the birch dress. Not too much contrast here, but I think it would have looked too flat without any highlights. Then I began adding the skin, which is mahogany, and eventually gets cherry highlights. With all the parts of the figure assembled, I traced most of her outline with the bookcase as the background, exiting the cut through the area that will become floor. The remaining outline was then traced along with the bottom edge of the bookcase, with the floor as the background. The floor is just a couple of pieces to suggest a shadow that I assembled off camera. This was mostly a very long straight cut, which was quite hard to do accurately on the scroll saw, and I would have preferred to knife cut this line. Then I would just have added the character and a couple of other details by poking a starting hole in the background like with the window. In hindsight, I think that would have been smarter and given a better result. But I got it done, and then I had to put some tape on the glue side to hold things together temporarily. That's because I have to remove all the tape that I've held the pieces with until now, because they are unevenly stacked in tons of layers, which would give uneven pressure on the glue. So I carefully peeled it off and replaced it with a single layer over the entire picture, making sure to not overlap the tape or create wrinkles. Then I removed the temporary glue side tape again, and this time that also involved some tape that I had used to protect the particularly fragile veneers when I sought out the darkest shadows in the bookcase. The glue was applied to a couple of beech veneers, a bit oversized, so I won't have to line up the picture with too much precision. They really want to cup when they start absorbing the glue. I placed some parchment paper in between so I can stack the two pieces without risk of gluing them together, and placed the sandwich in my press. I think this is actually a book press, but it came in really handy for this. I picked it up from a garage sale a long time ago, thinking it would be useful for veneering, and I finally got to clamp something with it. I have it screwed to my saw bench right now, so I can sit on the bench and really crank the press down. The next day I opened it up, and all that remained now was to free the pictures from the tape one last time and hit them with a card scraper. Now there will be a coat of finish on this, but that will come in the video about the cabinet build when I finish all the parts together. So other than that, I called this done. Thanks for watching, I'll see you later.